Hello guys and welcome to a new video. So in the last video we looked into like setting up PHP, making sure we have some PHP files and making sure we're able to view those files inside of your browser. So again, what we did to get that was inside of our htdocs we had we copied this folder CS221, and inside of this folder it contains all our project files. So the way we were able to access this CS221 was HTTP localhost and then CS221. So now if I rename this file to something like -1, and then if I go back to my browser, if I refresh, it says object not found because it's looking inside of htdocs. There is no folder called CS221. So now to fix it, for instance, if I do -1, there you go, it actually works. But, I'm just going to keep it CS221, go back to my folder over here and rename this one as well to the original naming CS221. Okay, so that's how you would be able to do that. Okay, so make sure also this is case sensitive. So if for whatever reason you get this message like object not found, it means there is some naming stuff that you need to fix. So so today we're just going to start with PHP like a little bit. So if I go into my index.php, now again, notice this file, there's not going to be any changes. It's entirely HTML so far. And PHP is just going to be injected inside of the page. And normally for PHP, you would have to go through and essentially start with some HTML, like for instance, your page headers, the navigations, the footer of the page, and maybe some kind of text in there. And PHP is just kind of like the dynamic stuff that's going to be entirely up to you to determine what that is. And whenever there's dynamic content, that's when you're going to add some PHP. So we know so far PHP is a server-side language. Now PHP also has some characteristics that's kind of different from Java. And we're going to see those as we do some scripting. So let's actually have some PHP injected. So the way you would do this is you would have less than sign, question mark, and notice VS Code actually gives me the suggestion. So it's actually PHP. And to kind of like end the injection of PHP, you would go question mark greater than sign. So here is actually going to be some PHP code you would need to add in here. And then let's say at some point you're going to have some HTML. You're going to pretty much just have basic HTML. So h4 header 4 close h4, and then over here if you need to have some PHP, you would just add the PHP as well. That's how it's going to go. So I'm just going to delete this one here and this one as well. So now for PHP, and normally when we learn programming languages, we start with the hello world example. So in PHP, if you want to print something on screen, it's actually echo. That's the echo command, and it's not, typically like with parentheses. All what you need to do is include the string that you want to print within double quotes. So hello world. Now you would need to end your statements with a semicolon, just like Java. So now if I save the file and then go, and which page are we? Index.html. So that's index. And there you go, that's the hello world. So notice now, this actually is printing like this because of our CSS. So actually if I just, you know what, I'm just gonna go to my index.php and remove the link altogether. So that's my hello world printed on the page. Now, if I right click and view page source for this page, you're going to be able to see that this is just printed just like a text on a page. Now, the nice thing about PHP is that anything inside of the echo statement, and you're going to be using echo a lot, is going to be printed really as is. Now, the program that's going to interpret whatever is printed is the browser. So what this means is you can have some HTML tags to be printed, and the browser is going to understand those tags perfectly, fine, and then it will be able to display those tags just like regular HTML tags. So for instance, I can say h1 or h4 and close this. Now if I refresh, notice it's just a header. And you can do anything like that. It's just perfectly fine. Okay. So now, if one thing also you could do with PHP is there is a function called PHP info. It's a built-in function that will give you some information about the PHP. It's kind of like a graphical interface, and you're not going to really need any of that. It's just kind of making sure the PHP version you have is at least version 7, because when we talk about databases, we're going to be using some built-in functions, and those built-in functions, they rely on a modern version of PHP. So if you're using older version of PHP, those functions won't work. So if you have like Zap installed on your machine like years and years ago, which I doubt it's the case, but just in case you get that, it's not going to be like a valid version for our purposes. So I get 7.2.28. So as long as it's a recent one, you shouldn't worry about that. So now for PHP, for comment is you have 2 double slashes, and also there is the pound, I think, which will also do some comments. So this is a comment, and notice it's actually color coded. The other thing in VS Code, I think on my Mac, if I do command /, it automatically, add the comment or remove the comment. So in this case, it's using the double slashes, but also pound is another way you would do comments. Okay, so this is one to keep in mind. The other thing is, let's talk about variables. So variables in PHP, they all start with $. So for instance, if I have a variable, all what I need to do is $ variable name and then put some value in that variable. Now here is one thing that's also different from Java. In Java, if you wanted to define a variable, you need to say something like a data type. So int age equal 20. That's Java. PHP is different. PHP is actually called loosely typed language. So loosely typed language means you don't need to say what data type the variable is going to hold. So this statement in PHP is just going to be $age equal 20. And that's PHP. So these two statements, in terms of like what they do, are identical. One in Java, one in PHP. But keep in mind again, PHP doesn't really care about the data types of the variables, and you can actually change the variable data types any times you want inside of your program without any problems. And make sure again, for variable names, they always start with $. So now here is actually my age equal 20, and let me define another variable called welcome, and this is going to be a string and then hello world. So now I'm just going to echo, let's do paragraph and that's another thing I'm just going to talk about. So now, essentially now, in this echo, we just printed a hello world, which was just a text, so we could perfectly, put it inside of other double quotes. In here, what we're doing is kind of something different. So I want to print a paragraph, and then whatever variable name, and then paragraph. So in Java, again, if you want to do string concatenation, you remember the plus. So for instance, if you want to do like system out.print line, you would have some string plus another string plus another string. In PHP, that plus is actually replaced with a $sign. So if I refresh this, notice I'm able to print this hello world. And again, if you do view page source, you should be able to see that this one is actually a paragraph. Now, another thing in PHP, which I believe, so let's have another variable. So like name, Walsh, and let's do something like echo so h4. If I do actually like name in here, just inside of those double quotes, notice it still works. Now, most of the times, like if you're doing something like this, it's perfectly fine. But as we talk about forms and things like that, you're going to be seeing a lot of double quotes already when you echo. And remember, like with the forms, we dealt with some input elements that have names and IDs. So in that scenario, you would need to use dot. I mean, I wouldn't say need to because there is a workaround, but I think I'm expecting you to understand how to do this, as well as for something simple like this would also work. Now, as I said, PHP is a loosely typed language. So what this means is I can just say age now is the string 20, and that's perfectly fine. And again, it's loosely typed. You don't have to say the data type for any variable. Now I'm getting an error here because this line actually doesn't have any semicolon. But this is something that's PHP is not going to complain about. Now, one thing kind of related to variables and where you would put the data is, I mean, when we, for instance, like if you have a form, you have user information, people submit their information. As they submit the form, you're going to redirect the user to a new page, and then you're going to say, well, welcome, whatever their first name is. And, something like other information, like their email address they typed in and things like that. And that's kind of how you would do that. You're going to get the value from the input element, and then when the user is submitting the form, you're gonna store that value in a variable, and then you echo that variable name. And that's essentially how to be able to do that. Okay, so that's pretty much it for this one. So make sure you're comfortable with like PHP, some variables and things like that, and then in the next video we're going to talk about other things in the PHP language. Okay, thank you guys, and let me know if you have any questions.